So anyways, welcome. It's good to see you all, and I thank you for taking the time to come here. My name is John Murtis, and I welcome you to the 2025 Day of Reason. Today we celebrate humankind's most amazing talent, rational thought. We are here to celebrate its impact on the world today, from medicine to our phones to our view of freedom. We celebrate its offshoots, the scientific method, critical thinking, and the law. We are also here to support the institutions that foster reason, the universities and its courts. We come here to defend these institutions and our right to critical thinking. When I was growing up, I read a lot of old books from my Uncle Andy's basement. These books were, neither age appropriate nor politically correct. I remember one line. He was as dumb as a Southerner, and I remember my mother's reaction when I used it on my cousin Les. This was actually a common stereotype about the Southerners in the late 19th and 20th centuries. Southerners were described as unmotivated, lazy, with a fisheye stare. There was even a name given to it, the Southern germ of laziness. Yet by World War II, the stereotype had all but disappeared. Was that because the U.S. became woke? No, it was because of a medical zoologist, Charles W. Stiles. In 1901, he found a parasite, a little worm, Nectar americanus. This hookworm would enter through the bare feet of those who lived in warm climates, infecting the body and causing an iron deficiency. Anemia that stunted growth and induced major cognitive impairments, especially in pregnant women. What was the reactionaries of the South what was the reaction in the South when this became public? Editorials were written claiming that the Northerners just wanted to make money by selling more shoes. The pulpit claimed that the Northerners wanted to take away the heritage of our children to run barefoot through the fields and streams. Some things never change. But this was 1905, not 2025. The richest man in the world, J.D. Rockefeller, was a philanthropist, and the federal government believed in the public good. The President Teddy was famous for having the compassion not to shoot a bear. Stiles joined with Rockefeller and came up with a strategy. They countered the resistance by a revival-style picnic, potato salad, barbecue, and games. People could come and be tested and given free medicine. Rockefeller funded much of this himself. Stiles and Rockefeller also influenced the federal government to set up the first of the federally funded healthcare clinics in the South, healthcare centers that now are in the danger of closing. Hookworm and the horrible toll it took on our people was eventually eliminated. This is more than one of the myriad of scientific and human success stories for a reason. It changed the narrative. Southerners didn't have a moral deficiency. They had a medical condition. Today there's a new worm. It doesn't enter through the bare feet, but crawls into the ears and into the eyes. There it resides, destroying the ability to reason. It infects all levels of government, from city to state to federal. It instantiated Karl Popper's worst fear. It infected the voters. This worm is a cult of personality, blind allegiance, hero worship, the antithesis of critical reasoning. Those of you who know me that I become annoyed when a celebrity or politician swears in a scientific text. On the origin of species is not the scientific equivalent to the Bible. We believe in evolution because it is the best explanation that matches the known facts, not because Charles Darwin says so. This bears repeating. Rational thought does not worship any man, woman, government, or idea. Critical thinking is a preventive medicine. Unfortunately, it is not a dewormer. It's not, why? Well, I'm going to be blunt, and my mother's not around. The first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is you don't know you're a member of the Dunning-Kruger Club. For all its strengths, critical thinking has its own critical weakness. It is an outgrowth of our innate understanding of cause and effect, but it is not natural. It does not come easy. It must be learned. It requires a proverbial village. It requires transparency. We cannot make the right decisions without all the data and knowing how it is collected. Witness goes. It requires acceptance of diverse opinions. One of the most dangerous statements by any U.S. president, when George W. Bush said, "You are either with us or against us." Reason and good government requires a free exchange of ideas and the ability to criticize. Critical thinking requires a strong legal system to defend our rights to speak out. Today I can stand here and I have no fear the doors being opened and being arrested. Next year, we may all be the enemy within. In our system, we must remember the words spoken by the fictional Harry Bosch. Everyone counts, or no one counts. Most of all, it requires education. We need to teach independent thinking, not indoctrination by rote. We need to teach unbiased history, because we all know what comes after the line, those that don't know history. Today, these institutions and reason itself are under a coordinated attack. Serious attacks that threaten the America you and I grew up believing in. This Day of Reason brings together a diverse but united group of speakers to address these issues and to celebrate, support, and defend rational thought. Let's keep reason legal. Our first speaker is a man whose many years has held one of the most important but underappreciated and difficult jobs, teaching history to high school students. Please welcome the Secretary of State for Rhode Island, Greg Ames.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate that. I want to acknowledge my colleagues in government, Representative Stewart, Senator Valverde. Thank you for being here as well. So I was a history teacher, so it's easy for me to talk about the history of the nation, but it's hard for me to convey to folks what this time means in relationship to them. So as I started last year's conversation, I said, I'm a person of faith, and because I'm a person of faith, there is nothing I value more than that wall that the Constitution's First Amendment has rightfully erected between church and state. We stand in a city where that wall was first constructed here in America. A wall that protects the freedom to practice religion from government interference, while at the same time ensuring government does not drift toward or even entertain theocratic tendencies. This wall, like democracy itself, is not promised. It is not guaranteed. Democracy, as the late great John Lewis said, is not a state, it is an act. We are in one of those tenuous periods in American history where we must act to preserve and protect this liberal democracy. So how do we do that? A government of the people, by the people, and for the people cannot be sustained if the people do not engage in civic life, if they do not have the requisite knowledge of the foundational principles of our democracy, if they are not aware of the value of separation of powers, a system of checks and balances among the branches, if they are not familiar with precedent-setting cases that have changed the course of American history, if they are not as familiar with their rights under the Bill of Rights as they are with the lyrics of their favorite songs. Abraham Lincoln referred to this essential knowledge as a civic creed, fashioned not from divinely revealed truth, but from the solid quarry of sober reason. Thomas Jefferson, the author of Virginia's Statute of Religious Freedom, and the person who coined the phrase, wall of separation between church and state, included in his first inaugural address a call for the establishment of rational political faith, founded in the essential principles of American government and democracy. What Jefferson and Lincoln were talking about is a civic religion based on reason, evidence, and perspective. that is only gained through the study of history. Shakespeare famously wrote in The Tempest, "What's past is prologue," and that was referenced. If we are not able to lean back on our history to inform our decision-making, we are condemned to repeat the mistakes of the past. We are only able to do this if we understand that past. The lessons of history not only help us make informed decisions, but they allow us perspective to place in context the challenges of the day. And we are lacking that perspective today. Unfortunately, we have seen a steady decay in the people's civic knowledge. And as the scaffolding of historical context begins to break down, passion, propaganda, and religious zealotry replace evidence, logic, and perspective. We are experiencing that every single day. Our civic engagement, unfortunately, has suffered as technology has replaced human interaction. Our ability to see the humanity in one another has waned as we socialize less and offer our opinions more, informed and otherwise, from the comfort of keyboards. Memberships in organizations like religious sects, labor unions, social clubs, cards and bowling league, professional organizations, community volunteer organizations have declined, leaving many Americans in a bubble and narrowing the perspectives to which they are exposed. Our education system focus on math and literacy, standardized testing, and outcomes has placed social studies, the study of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, on the back burner. A university experience that has become more and more about job training and less about comprehensive liberal arts-focused holistic education has created a situation where we are unable to call upon our history to make a case against the issues of the day. And more recently, social media bullying has made both educators and the citizenry in general gun-shy and hesitant about delving into conversations that may be uncomfortable or controversial, even with their neighbors. That has to end. We have to be able to have those conversations, informed by reason. This limits, as was mentioned, our ability to critically think, and it provides a platform for the most radical among us, and that seems to be the norm when we know it is not. With all that said, I still believe that the United States of America is the last best hope on earth, partly because I'm an educator, and partly because my view is informed by historical perspective. I have hope that we will overcome today's challenges and embark on a new era of civic religion and civil civic discourse. I believe this because our nation has overcome a great civil war, 2 world wars, a Great Depression, the internment of innocent American citizens, 2 Red Scares that challenged constitutional underpinnings and pitted neighbor against neighbor. We have confronted issues surrounding race, which still present great challenges, but in fits and starts have improved. We have become more accepting of mental health challenges and of marriage equality. We have navigated 2 deadly pandemics, large-scale and sometimes violent protests, political assassination, and a whole host of bad policy. And in overcoming these challenges, we have added to the Bill of Rights with constitutional amendments that provide equal protection under the law and expanded voting rights. We passed child labor laws, guaranteed public education for every child. We passed civil rights legislation that combats discrimination and legislation that protects our air and water. We fought to defeat fascism in Europe and ushered in the greatest period of peace and prosperity the world had ever known. We have provided safety nets for the poor, sick, and elderly that have substantially improved American life and significantly decreased poverty. We have invested in research that has cured deadly diseases and sent men and women to the stars. And we did these things because we the people, demanded that we do them. We demanded through our collective conscience, through our voices, through our votes. We overcame these obstacles because we learned from the past, changed course, and moved forward. When I speak to Rhode Islanders in schools and community centers, many have lost faith in our ability to do big things or to do the right thing. Some are in despair about one issue or another, or the general state of the nation or state. I remind them that when the great civil rights leader John Lewis lay bloodied and beaten, his skull fractured, watching law enforcement in the name of government beating innocent voting rights protesters, he must have been at the lowest point of his entire life, a life that was filled with low points and oppression. He must have believed that things would never change. But 7 months later, 7 months after he lay bloody, beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a bridge named for a Confederate general and a KKK Grand Dragon, the Voting Rights Act was passed. 7 months from being beaten within an inch of his life, we the people demanded unfettered voting rights for Black Americans, and we wrote it into law based on the promises in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. We can and have done big things, even during times of division. But we can do more when we have a civic religion. We have to teach the whole story of American history. We have to convince Americans that learning and understanding the Constitution is more important to our nation's well-being than any public policy initiative or anything a politician says or does. It is fundamental to the survival of the Republic. So the call to action is to embrace this reasoned civic religion, this sober political faith that Jefferson and Lincoln so valued. When I visit classrooms, I pull out my pocket Constitution and we give them to all the students, and I tell them it is this imperfect document that makes us Americans. We do not have a shared religion. We do not have a shared political point of view. We do not have a shared ethnicity. This is the document that makes us Americans. And its beauty is it can be changed and it can be challenged, but it is the document that keeps us on the rails. The rule of law, the Constitution, the promise of justice for all, the promise of equality is what makes this document work. And we as a nation have to start to use reason and logic and evidence and understand our past so that we can make the case against the issues we face today. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I do have a citation acknowledging the Day of Reason. I'm not going to read it because I've already taken too long, but there is the citation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the state senator for District 35 of East Greenwich, New Kingston, North Kingston, and South Kingston. She is the vice chair of the Senate Committee for Health and Human Services. What?
I said not anymore.
Not anymore. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you've had a long history of democratic activism. Please welcome State Senator Bridget Valderi. You should update your resume.
Thank you. That is a good reminder that I should update my website. I am no longer the vice chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, but however, I am still the senator from District 35. Well, I think we can all agree, like Greg Amore for president, right? That was an excellent speech. Thank you so much, Secretary. So it's really great to join you here today to recognize and celebrate a Day of Reason here in Rhode Island. I'd like to thank the Secretary for being here and my colleagues in government. I see Senator Loria over here and Rep. Stewart as well. And I'd also like to thank the Rhode Island Atheists for not only bringing us here together today, but for all of their advocacy this session. I've seen you all testifying on some really important legislation this year, and it's very impactful. So today is not just a celebration of knowledge, reason, and free thinking. It's a reaffirmation of a founding principle of our democracy, that governance should be guided by evidence, exchange of ideas, and the collective pursuit of truth. In a time when misinformation often spreads faster than facts, and public trust is being shaken by chaos and division, a recommitment to reasoned thinking could not be more urgent or patriotic. The National Day of Reason was established not in opposition to belief or religious observance, but in defense of fairness and secularism. It exists to promote a government that represents all of its citizens, regardless of creed, and to honor the vital role that reason, critical thinking, and science play in shaping policies that improve our lives. Now I want to focus on that last one, science, for a minute. My husband often laughs at me for the number of times I start a sentence with, I was listening to this really great podcast, because I do listen to a lot of podcasts. And so I usually say that before I share some interesting fact or story that I've just learned. And this past weekend was no different. I was doing yard work and listening to an episode of Radio Lab. I'm sure a lot of you, I see a lot of nodding heads, I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with that podcast. And the episode that I was listening to related the remarkable story of how a very cool but seemingly not very useful discovery made back in 1966 eventually provided the undergirding for really important scientific innovation decades later. So in 1966, Indiana University researchers had used an $80,000 government grant for basic science, the kind that's being cut off by the Trump administration right now. They used that $80,000 to study if there was any life that was capable of surviving in the super hot temperatures of some hot springs in Yellowstone Park. And they found out there was. There was this bacteria that they had named Thermus aquaticus. And they cataloged that microbe, and they put it in a microbank, and it was essentially put on the shelf and forgotten for decades. And at that time, it was a cool discovery, but it just wasn't a very useful discovery. It was a quest for knowledge's sake, and curiosity for curiosity's sake. But 3 decades later, when other scientists were desperate to find an enzyme that could withstand high temperatures for a process they were trying to come up with to replicate DNA so that they could sequence it, it was Thermus aquaticus to the rescue. And the PCR was born, the polymerase chain reaction. And it really changed the game. They sequenced DNA for the first time, and today every major discovery using DNA has used PCR. So we've sequenced the human genome, we can diagnose genetic diseases like cystic fibrosis, we can do virus testing. I'm sure PCR sounds familiar to you because we had all those PCR COVID tests a couple years ago. And so government-funded curiosity for curiosity's sake had led to modern bioscience. And so I tell you this story, one, because it's cool and I like to tell people about things I've just learned, but also because we are clearly living in a time where potential stories like that could just be snuffed out before they even get started nowadays. You know, right now this presidential administration is trying to turn us away from the quest for knowledge and truth under the guise of cutting waste and ending woke DEI stuff. Billions in research grants are being canceled. The National Science Foundation, the Health and Human Services Administration, the Centers for Disease Control, NOAA, NASA, just to name a few agencies, are all on the chopping block. The U.S. has been a leader in scientific research and innovation in climate science and medical science and engineering for a long time. That could all be thrown away, ending decades of progress. And we could all here in the U.S. and across the world miss out on the basic science that leads to major breakthroughs that help all of us. The assault on knowledge and information is beyond alarming, and it absolutely flies in the face of reason. As one of our founding fathers, James Madison, famously stated, the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. Well, that advancement and diffusion of knowledge is under attack. The aforementioned cuts, coupled with attacks on public education, efforts to ban books, and stymie our institutes of higher learning, the spread of disinformation, it's all aimed at limiting who has access to knowledge and what information and ideas they can access. It's really aimed at control, And so I know that so many of you are doing really great work to push back against these and so many other attacks on our democracy. And I thank you for all you're doing. A lot of us here in the General Assembly are trying to do things at the state level to protect Rhode Islanders. And so around here, what that looks like is passing the Freedom to Read Act, protecting reproductive rights and public education, protecting access to accurate public health information, standing up for our LGBTQ community. And we appreciate all of the support that you all give us in that work, and we really need you to keep at it. So we live in a state with a proud legacy of freedom of conscience. You know, Roger Williams envisioned a society where church and state were not only separate, but each made stronger by that separation. He believed that a government based on reason and liberty could protect the rights of all people, whether religious or secular, and that no one should be compelled to support or submit to another's beliefs. And that legacy still matters today, because today we face real challenges: climate change, public health, inequality, and we must meet them with clear thinking, tested evidence, and open dialogue. And this isn't always about being perfect or having the right answer. It's about creating a space where the best ideas can win, because they're supported by facts and data and not favored by power. Reason doesn't ask us to agree on everything. In fact, it demands that we question, that we engage, and that we listen, and that we build a more just and equitable society through collaboration and mutual respect. So, on this day of reason, let us recommit ourselves to the ideals that have carried our state and our country forward: the freedom to think, the courage to question, and the responsibility to seek knowledge. Let's leave here today not only proud of Rhode Island's heritage, but also inspired to protect and extend that legacy through education, civic engagement, and the ongoing defense of truth in public life. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Stewart. She is the state representative of District 59 Pawtucket, and I hope her webpage is up to date. She is a member of the House Health and Human Service Committee, the House Innovation and Technology Committee, and the House State Government and Elections Committee. Representative Stewart is also a teacher. She's a distinguished Fulbright Award winner. Please welcome her.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out today. And I want to acknowledge and thank Secretary Amores, Senator Valverde, for their remarks, and it was great to see Senator Loria here, and also my friends from the ACLU. I always feel like I'm on the right side when they show up at an event for the same thing. So I want to thank the Rhode Island Atheists for inviting me to participate in this event. It was an honor to participate last year. It's an honor to participate in this year's Day of Reason, marking the importance of reason, religious freedom, and separation of church and state in Rhode Island. And I guess, reason is really important, but so is being unreasonable. Okay, and your commitment to reason. And I'm going to do something that maybe some people would say is not exactly reasonable, but I'm going to share a story with you because it's pretty recent. So, in honor of today, I was going to put forward a resolution in the House to mark the occasion. And interestingly, but maybe not surprisingly, I was thwarted in my efforts to put forward a resolution for immediate consideration acknowledging the day. And so I wanted to actually share the resolution, the text of the resolution with you, so you can be the judge of the decision to not allow it to go forward. So, recognizing May 6th, 2025 as a National Day of Reason in the state of Rhode Island and affirming the central importance of reason in the betterment of humanity. So this resolution was actually based on a resolution that Jamie Raskin put forward last year in recognition of the Day of Reason. And the text is as follows. Whereas the application of reason has been the essential precondition for humanity's extraordinary scientific, medical, technological, and social progress since before the founding of our country. Whereas reason provides vital hope today for confronting the crises of our day, including the civilizational emergency of climate change, for advancing civil liberties for all, including the rights of LGBTQIA+ individuals and access to reproductive health care, and for cultivating the rule of law, democratic institutions, justice, and peace among nations. Whereas America's founders insisted on the primacy of reason and knowledge in public life and drafted the Constitution to prevent official establishment of religion and to protect freedom of thought, speech, and inquiry in civil society. And whereas James Madison, author of the First Amendment and fourth President of the United States, stated, quote, "The advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty," end quote. And, quote, "Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives," end quote. Now, therefore, it be resolved that this House of Representatives of the state of Rhode Island hereby recognizes May 6, 2025 as a National Day of Reason, and be it further resolved that we encourage all citizens, residents, and visitors to join in observing this day and to focus on the central importance of reason, critical thought, the scientific method, and free inquiry to resolving social problems and promoting the welfare of humankind. So I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to share that publicly with you all, and I will encourage you, when it's heard in committee at some point later on, to come to that hearing and or offer a letter of support on its behalf. And I'll just say in a couple further things in closing. There's been, a lot of hearkening back to some of our state's founding, the role of Roger Williams, and although not a perfect individual, he did put forward some things that were so important that I just want to take a moment to recognize by sharing with you a passage from a book called The Wordy Shipmates. The author, in talking about Roger Williams, said the following: "His greatness lies in his refusal to keep his head down in a society that prizes nothing more than harmony and groupthink. He cares more about truth than popularity or respect or personal safety. He's after the thing free people always enjoy, yearn, or fight for. He called it soul liberty. And I think now in 2025, we're all in need of bolstering soul liberty more than ever. And so, again, happy Day of Reason. I'm really happy to be here today to recognize this. And let's not be afraid of reason. Let's redouble our commitment to it. Our country needs it now more than ever. So, thank you.
One of the themes here is that we need a strong legal defense. And the state of Rhode Island and the ACLU is lucky to have Steve Brown, who has been around for many years. And please welcome him for his talk.
Thank you very much, all. There's really not much I can add to the great speeches you've already heard this afternoon, but it is important to keep in mind that freedom of thought and freedom of inquiry are really the foundations of any democratic society, and as I think you've heard, and I think you know, they are under great attack today. It's important to recognize, as we've heard from the history teacher, that this is not new. One of the first acts of Congress was passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts, which allowed newspaper publishers to be thrown into jail. But I think we also all recognize that today we are near a dangerous precipice in what is going on. When you have individuals who are whisked off the street by hooded agents merely because they have written an op-ed expressing opposition to government policy, something is very seriously wrong. Even closer to home, we know that just a few years ago, a school librarian in Westerly was threatened with felony charges of obscenity merely for being a good school librarian. These are really troubling issues. But what's important to keep in mind is that we all have the ability to contest them. Right now, at least for the moment, the courts have been pushing back against the federal administration and issued a whole series of rulings that have countered some of these steps that the federal government has taken. Here in Rhode Island, in direct response to what happened in Westerly, we have the Freedom to Read Act that's been introduced in the General Assembly that I'm convinced, because of its rightness, the General Assembly is going to pass this year and protect individuals. Because those opportunities are still available, because we still do live in a democracy, it's important for all of us to exercise the rights that the Constitution gives us. The Day of Reason is a perfect opportunity to be here at the State House, one of the major places where you can make a difference. And what I would encourage all of you today for this Day of Reason is to find your legislators and give them some reason. Tell them why they should do the right thing. Thank you.
So today's Day of Reason is sponsored by the American Atheists, as you've heard. We're an associate member of the American Atheists. Our last speaker is probably the most important to us because the American Atheists provide us support and expertise on running things like this Day of Reason. Please welcome Victoria Anderson.
So I know each one of our speakers keeps saying, well, I don't know how I'm going to follow up with everyone. I feel like I have the most pressure. I have to match everybody's energy. Not sure how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to try. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today, we come together to celebrate one of the defining features of our democracy. And it's something that often feels as though it's in short supply: reason. When our nation's founders laid the groundwork for American democracy, they chose to build it not on religious doctrine, but on reason, knowledge, and consent of the governed. And rather than allow religious beliefs alone to dictate the future of our country, the Founding Fathers drew a bright line between church and state. They understood that the only way forward was as a pluralistic society where the rule of law reigns supreme and reason serves as the cornerstone to public policy. For the American experiment to succeed, we needed a democracy that serves every person, and we need a democracy that remains accessible to all, religious and non-religious alike. There are definitely days where it feels like these principles have been completely abandoned. People across the country are deeply and justifiably concerned about what earth-shattering developments will dominate the news cycle and potentially upend their entire lives. We are living through an era where misdirection, disinformation, and so-called alternative facts run rampant, and where expertise is stigmatized rather than celebrated. Our government rarely, if ever, feels as though it's by the people and for the people right now. I know I'm not the only one who is struggling to comprehend the velocity at which many of our nation's core institutions have been unraveled. Nor am I the only one who's had a few too many sleepless nights, concerned about what lies ahead, right around the corner. But as we come together to celebrate this Day of Reason, I want to shift gears and I want to focus on what we're fighting for rather than what we're fighting against. We're fighting to make sure our friends, our families, our coworkers, and our neighbors never have to live in fear of the government. We are fighting to create a world where every student has access to an equitable and quality education, where we can give them the tools that they will need to create a better world. We are fighting for a future where laws are enacted based on measurable data and scientific evidence. And most importantly, we are fighting to make sure that love, compassion, and reason win out over hatred and fear. Fighting back against a system seemingly designed to sow chaos, remove our rights, and turn us against members of our communities is hard. But we are here fighting, not because it's easy, but because not fighting would be unconscionable. If there's one thing that Rhode Island, the state known for church-state separation, knows how to do better than anywhere else in the country, it is advocate for a secular government that represents all citizens, regardless of religious or non-religious belief. We have brave storms to come here, both metaphorically and physically, and we are here to show the rest of the country that you, the Rhode Islanders, are on the front lines doing what you do best, advocating for reason-based government. Thank you so much for what each and every one of you does every day, and thank you so much for allowing me to celebrate the Day of Reason with you.
This concludes our talk, and I'd like to thank all our board members, Gilberto, Terry Sousa, and Brian Cardoso. I'm sorry, I'm losing my ability to speak, for their help in putting this together.